Good to go. Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole for January 20th. We'll call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda, or second item on the agenda, is the adoption of the agenda, but just note that item 5C has been replaced. The item that was normally, or previously there, will be carried over to a future meeting, but we'd like to replace 5C with an update on the grandfather tree. Other than that, would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I so move to adopt the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Councillor McFadden. All in favor? It's carried. Move on then to the previous minutes for January 6th. Entertain a motion for approval. Councillor Flowers.
Move to adopt the minutes of January 6th of the COW meeting.
Okay. All in favor? That's carried. So we'll move on to, no delegations tonight. We'll move on to business 5A, and this is the annual property assessment overview. And Ryan Lodemeyer?
Almost, Ryan Lodemeyer.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to present the 2025 annual property assessment overview. So as you may be aware, the property assessments are legislated to reflect the valuation date of July 1st of the previous year, so 2024. And they're also to reflect the physical condition date of properties as of year end, December 31st, 2024. As you can, per the shift report included in your council report, the year-over-year increase for residential single-family homes is 10.59%, resulting in an average assessment value of $680,700. The townhomes and duplex inventories saw a year-over-year increase of 10.82%, with an average assessment value of $510,200. And lastly, the condominiums saw a year-over-year increase of 14.90%, with an average assessment value of $380,100. The non-residential inventory also saw year-over-year increases of 4% for commercial properties and 10% for our industrial properties due to increases in our market rents and recent transactions. The taxable assessment split, excluding the CRL area, which is the Community Revitalization Levy area, saw a slight modest increase in the residential property class. This is due to residential inventory and or value relative to the non-residential inventory increasing. When we include the Community Revitalization Levy area, the taxable assessment split increases 1.24% in the non-residential portion. The actual growth came in for 2024 came in at 3.62%. This is just slightly under the estimated 3.64% that was presented at budget. The actual growth represents the increase in the assessment base from tangible development that occurred throughout the year, such as new construction, site work, and registered subdivisions. As far as information for our residents, we encourage property owners to visit our website where there are resources to review their property assessment details. They can also find frequently asked questions with explanatory videos regarding the assessment and property tax process. We'll be actually adding a few more explanatory videos to our website for this year. They can also view the GIS map viewer to compare assessment values to other properties. And lastly, we've introduced a new property tax estimator that is available for residents to use. One of the main questions we have is, how does my property assessment change impact my property taxes? This estimator will give the property owners a clear indication of how their assessment change will impact their property taxes. Emphasis on the estimator is that it is just using the 2024 tax rates and requisitions. We won't know the 2025 tax rates and requisitions until April or May, which in that point the estimator will be updated as well. So assessment notices are to be mailed on January 23rd. There is a 67-day inquiry period where we encourage property owners to contact us if they have any questions about their property assessment or the assessment process in general. Which leads into a final complaint date of April 1st, 2025. So if after discussing with an assessor, a property owner is still not satisfied with their assessment value, they can file a formal complaint prior to April 1st, which will be heard in front of an assessment review board panel. And just prior to questions from council, I'd like to thank our assessment team who have worked diligently to produce the assessment roll once again for 2025, and our tax department who prepares the assessment notices for us each year. And a special thank you to my predecessor, Mrs. Gail Butts, who retired in May of last year after 10 years of dedicated service to the municipality. Gail was responsible for bringing the assessment department in-house back in 2014 and developing it to where it is today. So a special thanks to her and a happy retirement. Open to any questions.
Thanks, Ryan. I'll turn to my council colleagues. Are there any questions? Councillor Federico.
Thank you. I'm just curious as to how you came up with this $680,700 average assessment. Can you kind of explain to me as to how you came up with that number? Just because it seems a bit high considering some of the stats that I've also heard.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Federico. So the average assessment value reflects, for the residential detached inventory, reflects the average assessment for all properties within the municipality in that class. So that ranges from everything from 400,000 to over $1 million. That reflects in that average assessed value. Some of the stuff that you may see from the Calgary Real Estate Board, I believe in June of 2024, their report indicated a benchmark price of $678,000. The difference between those values is really the difference in the data set used. So as I mentioned, with our average assessed value, we're using all of those properties in that class, sold and unsold, and turning that average assessment value, whereas the benchmark price for the Calgary Real Estate Board uses really just the sales data from the MLS service that they use in determining a typical price for that type of property class.
So I guess I thought that the average assessed value was done on a block value, right? Like based on neighborhood, based on sales, based on a particular order of like what is also sold that's like similar to that results? Or are you just saying that you've taken the entire solds and averaged them out is basically kind of what you just said?
Yeah, it's the average assessed value for that respective class, property class.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. That's all I have for right now.
Any other questions for Ryan on this one? Okay, we're going to move on to item 5B, and you're here for that, the electronic communications bylaw introduction.
Yeah, moving on to I'm here to present the draft for the electronic communications bylaw. Just a little refresher and background. As you may recall from the introduction to the bylaw at last committee of the whole, the current delivery method for property assessment and tax notices is by mail. Challenges with the current method are associated printing and mailing costs, potential mailing delays, like we saw with Canada Post strike in December, and the overall environmental impact. Back in 2019, the provincial government implemented a Red Tape Reduction Act, which amended sections of the MGA to allow municipalities to send notices and other documents that would fall under Parts 9 and 10, which is the assessment and taxation sections of the MGA, by electronic means. So the objectives of the bylaw is faster delivery of notices and a digital-first approach. The initiative would provide flexibility to our residents that wish to receive these types of communications electronically and offer enhanced customer service by providing access to these notices in one convenient location. Residents would have the ability to print off duplicate copies of notices or to reprint a notice if it is misplaced. And this would ultimately reduce costs associated with the printing and mailing for the assessment and tax notices. So the amendment to the MGA requires that 4 conditions be met prior to passing a bylaw under these new provisions. The first one is that council must be satisfied that the property bylaw includes appropriate measures to ensure the security and confidentiality of the notices, documents, and information being sent in consultation with our Information Services Department. The Cochrane e-Services platform and the viewing of notices are completed over a secure encrypted connection. The second condition is that council must give notice of the proposed bylaw in a manner that it considers likely to bring the proposed bylaw to the attention of substantially all persons that would be affected by it. Communication plan would be implemented once the bylaw has been adopted to communicate with property owners through social media platforms, local newspapers, and the town Cochrane website to provide them the option to enroll into this service. And the last 2 conditions are that the bylaw indicates the methods by which the persons may opt in to receive the notice or documents, and that the person to whom it is being sent has opted in to receive it by those means. And those provisions for opt-in and opt-out processes are in section 4 of the attached bylaw draft. An updated implementation plan would be tentatively first reading on January 27th with second and third on February 10th. That would lead into a communication campaign and enrollment period from February to May before property tax bills are delivered at the end of May. This would be an ongoing communication and enrollment period to have encourage property owners to enroll for the service. That concludes my presentation and open to any questions.
We'll start with Councillor Wilson, I think. Oh, sorry, Councillor Flowers, I didn't look far enough right.
Hi, no questions. I just wanted to say I think it's great timing with the price of stamps just going up. And we'll save a lot of paper that way. People are used to getting their bills over the internet now, and it is confidential. I know recently I had mail that got put in somebody else's slot, and it was 2 weeks before they gave it to me. And it was confidential information, so it can happen any which way. So I think it's a great move and good. Thank you for doing this.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Ryan. I just had a question about property transfer. When a home buyer buys a existing residence and they are the new owner of that residence, they would have to opt into the email situation that you're speaking of. I don't understand how that works. If the previous resident had email set up, then when the new buyer buys it, would it go back to paper, or how does that plan to work?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, yeah, so we do get notified of transfer of title through land titles. So once that transfer comes through, then it would be, the property would be clicked off to basically opted out at that point, once a transfer comes in, and then the new owner can sign up on through the web form if they would like to receive it electronically.
Okay, so it just opts back to a paper format until they opt in, to the new owner opts into email?
Correct.
Okay. I know our council in years previous have had residents come before us that were looking to have penalties waived because the paper that was sent to them wasn't sent to the right place or box or whatever, and hopefully this would be the beginning of eliminating some of those problems. So yeah, it all seems reasonable. Thanks for bringing it up.
Councilor Federico?
Thank you, through Mr. Jerikat. I'm just curious about the parameters, is if we don't hear from a resident on either side as to whether or not they've actually received anything, what kind of follow-up do we do with these people, or are they just kind of left on their own? I mean, that's my only fear, is that we bring in something new to state that electronic communications are going through, but yet we don't actually hear from them. Then there becomes a lapse of judgment, and then all of a sudden people come back at us, kind of like what Councillor Wilson was previously stating. So I just want to make sure that we're crossing all the Ts, dotting the Is, and making sure that nobody's left behind.
Yeah, so with regards to, I guess, the verification that they've been received, it ultimately would be the responsibility of the property owners if they do opt in. In the bylaw, we do indicate that they need to update us if there's any changes to their email account or anything like that, similar to a mailing address as well that we do currently. So with regards to property assessment notices, those are publicly online and communicated when they come out. So if they don't receive the notice, the information is online for them. As far as property tax bills, that would be a similar case in that they would be communicated that tax bills are out if they've opted in electronically or have it mailed to contact us if they haven't received it at that point.
Yeah, I guess my only fear with that is that not everybody does that ahead of time. So I guess before I would ever consider giving this my approval is that we actually have something in the background to suggest that if somebody doesn't give us that required information or doesn't update, that we are following up, because things get lost. And I don't want somebody else to come forward to state that we didn't provide them the right information and then just say, sorry, it was up to you, right? We have people who are elderly, we have people who are not necessarily always online. So I just want to make sure that that information is directed to them as much as possible. And to be fair, this is probably not going to be something that's solved in 1 year. It's probably going to take a couple year cycle to be able to get it fed to all our citizens that are in the town. And so I just want to make sure that there's more of a leeway, I guess, to those who don't respond right away, that we actually have some sort of timeline that allows them to, some sort of grace that allows them to be able to respond, rather than us just saying, well, sorry, yeah, as a resident, it was kind of on you, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, through the chair of the councillor, Federico, I do understand what you're saying. The process from the electronic communications really would be no different than the mailing process in those circumstances for that. So that's something that would be, I guess, more of a general policy that we would have to look at for that. But I believe with a lot of this, and maybe senior management can jump in on this if I'm speaking out of turn, but those are all legislated timelines as well. So to grace periods and whatnot would be something that would need to be looked at through that lens. But
yeah, thank you. I don't have much to add. I think Mr. Littlemeyer has spoken to it well. I just keep in mind, in terms of the information exchange, I think, Councillor Federico, that you're referring to, this practice has been in place for quite some time, where it's a requirement of the individuals to notify us. We don't really have the ability to monitor 16 or 17,000 individuals or households in terms of whether or not their addresses or emails changing. So I do think it is important that we note the personal responsibility in those cases. However, we do take a lot of action, as Ryan was suggesting. So for when assessment notices come out or when tax notices come out, that is well advertised so someone can be aware of. And then if they don't receive it, they can contact us and we can make the appropriate changes. We obviously, it's a critical process and can be impactful, and so we want to ensure that everyone receives the appropriate information as seamlessly as possible, and we'll work with anyone where that is not taking place to rectify any issues that may exist.
You okay, Marty? Good. Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just went back and forth here. I think it was number 47 on this one, or 4.7. But so I really like this. I particularly like that it's opt-in. So I'm not too worried that we're leaving anybody behind, because the default is still going to be mail. And so unless you've opted to receive an email version, you're always going to get a paper copy. So for me, that's the way that we're making sure we're not leaving anybody behind, is the base service isn't changing unless you opt for a change. The one I was kind of, just to get some clarity on, is that lost it. So we send it to them, and if it bounces, or if we get some sort of notification that that email address isn't correct, we don't do any follow-up to that? Or we just automatically move to paper copy?
Through the chair to Councilor McFadden, there will be processes there to verify once the email, say, first instance, the email bounces back, we will have the information to follow up with that property owner. If we don't hear back from the property owner, then we would revert it back to opt-out and back to mailing at that standpoint. So there are mechanisms in place for those instances where emails might bounce back, or if the resident entered the incorrect email, we have mechanisms to verify that information. And if we can't verify, then we'll put it back to opt-out and back to mailing.
So yeah, so it's like if somebody enters it, types their email address wrong, misses a digit, whatever the case might be, then your team follows up with them with a phone call just to verify? Is that what's being envisioned?
Yes, correct, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that seems to catch it that way as well. And yeah, if I would actually personally much prefer that all of my utility bills just come electronically. But yeah, I think this is great, move in the great direction, and I think you've thought through a lot of little details that'll make it easy to transition. So, anyhow, good job to you and your team.
Thank you.
Right, I just had a couple comments myself. I want to say thank you. I think this is a really great idea for our community, and I think it goes without saying amongst my colleagues that this is a really innovative step forward for our community, and I appreciate you and your team for doing so. Just to segue back to Councillor Fadeko's comment, so there'll be a really effective communications plan in terms of being able to help people understand that. I mean, one of the things that I really admire about the annual property assessment FAQs was that almost any question that anybody might ask was covered in there. And so, I would encourage you in terms of communications plan and the FAQs for this, that you would cover off of what you think will be the typical questions that people might ask, right?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Reid. Yeah, that's something that we can implement in our communication plans to emphasize those timelines, responsibilities, and also just how the process to opt in and what to do if they want to opt out will all be outlined on our website as well.
Perfect. Yeah, again, I just want to echo the comments that this has been a really innovative idea. This is exciting for the town, and I think this is the kind of things that council is pleased to see come forward from administration. So thank you and your team.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll turn now to the new item 5C. This is an update. I don't know if an update is a proper term, but in relation to the grandfather tree. So as most of us are aware, last week with the 80-kilometer-hour winds, a beloved icon from our community was knocked down. And so Lisa Almond, you're here to give us a little bit of an update on that.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council and Deputy Mayor. We wanted to provide an update to Council and to the community regarding the sad loss of the grandfather tree last Thursday evening. I think the outpouring of ideas, suggestions, and stories since then shows just how cherished this tree actually was in our community, because it stood as a symbol of history and beauty and connection for so many. So as we look forward, we're just asking for some patience and understanding as our parks team collaborates to determine the best way forward. Last Friday, we had propagation specialists out on site trying to determine and gathering samples to see if we can propagate and ensure the legacy through the tree into baby grandfather trees. So that is happening. We have done that. And then for the community, in terms of what we're doing right now to honor this beloved tree and provide, I guess, a place of reflection, we have put a journal and a post box at the tree. So if anybody wants to share stories or give us suggestions what they would like to see happen in the area, they can provide us those suggestions there. Additionally, we have provided an email address on cochrane.ca, as well as quite a bit of our social media has covered what email address they can use to contact us to provide community feedback and share stories and those kinds of things. I also would like to note that, please, we are doing a full safety assessment of the area as well. before proceeding with any next steps. So please, we ask the community to respect the signage in the area and the fencing in the area, because we don't know the safety of the area just yet. We need to assess the trees in the area as well. So please respect that fencing and obey the signage. And then I guess just thank you for understanding, and the outpouring from the community has been phenomenal. And we will celebrate the life and legacy of this tree, and we are looking to the community for suggestions. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And I don't see any comments or questions. Oh, Councilor McFadden.
Yeah, I think just a quick comment. I think the loss of the tree, it really hit the community hard, and so all the great stories that people shared, and I think back to all the different stories my own family has with it, and then all the great ideas that I've heard from the community, and just to paraphrase a few of them, it's, you know, I saw a lot of comments and heard a lot of feedback about, you know, let the tree, you know, go back to nature and contribute to nature as any fallen tree would in its natural life cycle. Is there a way we could save some of the wood and perhaps, you know, do a bench or different memorial ideas? So those are some great ideas that I've seen go through there. So, and for myself, I like to see a combination of honoring letting the tree contribute to its natural life cycle, but also finding a way to you know create a bench or somehow let people tangibly be able to relate to the tree. And I think my kids, in talking to them, they kind of reflected both perspectives on trees. I asked my son how he felt about it, and he's spends a great deal of time down there. And he says, well, of course I'm sad, Mom, but it's just a tree. You know, there's lots of old trees out there. And I shared this with my daughter, who'd also spent a great deal of time with the tree, and she's like, well, yeah, Mom, but it was everybody's grandfather's tree. And I think for me, that's what really resonated, that at the end of the day, that was a tree that belonged to all of us. And while it might have meant something different to all of us, it meant something. So anyhow, I really appreciate all the comments that I've seen from folks in our community that really valued it. And a shout out to Tim Hall, who's graciously shared out an image of the tree for everybody to download. And I just look forward to seeing what we can do to you know, continue to honor the tree and how it brings us everybody together. So anyway, thank you for the work you're doing so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McFadden.
Thank you for the update on that. You're staying around for item 5D then?
I am.
Building Safer Communities Grant Update.
Okay. Thank you. So good evening again, Mayor and Council and Deputy Mayor. I'm here to provide an update on the Building Safer Communities grant. So in 2022, the federal government announced a Building Safer Communities Fund to help municipalities prevent, so I want to stress that, prevent gun and gang violence by addressing its root causes. Under the leadership of Stacey Lowe and Jay Juden, our Director of Community Safety, we applied to this fund, and I actually want to officially thank them for their vision and their foresight and some hard work that went into this. And we were successful. We were approved in the amount of just over $400,000 over 2 years. So we will be utilizing the grant to assess our current state and develop and implement a community wellness plan with a focus on youth services. So to do this work, we went through a robust RFP process and secured the services of BASA Social Innovations. They have significant experience in this area, working with a lot of other municipalities. Their expertise lies in data gathering and stakeholder engagement, and what was very important to us was their strong experience in youth engagement and how to engage with youth, because that is a different crowd, and this is the crowd that we need to hear what their lived experience is as well. So BASA is very experienced in that area. So the purpose of a community wellness plan looks at addressing the root causes of crime and gang involvement and looking at enhancing community services. It's going to provide a strategic and preventative approach to foster resilience amongst youth and reduce criminal behavior. Where we're at in the timeline, we're currently in the phase 1, which started in November 2024 and will end in March of this year. And those 5 months, the team is looking at engaging with stakeholders and gathering data, and they will come forward with their comprehensive plan, which will be presented to Council after the March 31st deadline. Deliverable overviews, which is of course super important. BASA is going to provide us with a detailed budget and roadmap for the 2025-2026 initiatives that will come out of this plan, looking at current youth resources that are within our community and evidence prevention programs. So that budget, I want to stress, does include money. This is a flow-through money, so grassroots organizations within our community that are doing incredible work in our community, how can we bolster them, how can we support them, and that money would flow through to those programs. So that leads me to what are we doing right now? We need to evaluate our current programs. So currently there's a municipal-wide assessment going on to examine the connections between gang violence, homelessness, and service gaps, looking at what additional resources we need and how to enhance the resources that we do have to counteract bullying and preventing vulnerable youth from engaging in criminal behavior. Stakeholder consultations, to mention a few, are RCMP, social support services within the community, and those grassroots youth intervention initiatives, because they will provide us critical insights as we develop this program. Again, those data gathering activities, they also include engagement with town staff. We have a lot of knowledge within our town. Our FCSS staff are very knowledgeable in this area. Our municipal enforcement, parks, they are interacting with youth on a regular basis. We have a lot of touch points with youth, so we're starting internally and then moving outwards so that we can have informed decision-making that is data-driven. So the outcome will include this 3-year community wellness plan with specific goals and strategies and resource recommendations to secure additional funding, which is also very important to us. We can't do a 2-year plan where we've got this money and then go, okay, then you're all on your own. We need to secure additional funding to support anything that we do put in place. Mentioning again that support from RCMP and support services, looking into the insights that are facing our specific community, our Cochrane at-risk youth, because their expertise will aid in formulating strategies that effectively address crime. And this, again, also includes coordinating with our school system as well, getting into the schools, getting into where the youth are, and actually getting to survey the youth. Collaborating with those grassroots initiatives to ensure that those interventions are tailored to the community's unique needs. This is very important to us because Cochrane is very fortunate. As we know right now, we're gathering the data. What kind of a problem do we have? What are we facing? Getting that information, and those grassroots initiatives are the ones that are working with the youth right now. So tapping into that knowledge and then building relationship with them to further enhance the work that they do. And then, as I mentioned, identifying those service gaps and challenges so that we can ensure sufficient support for those at-risk populations that need assistance. Gathering best practice and evidence-based approaches. Another great thing about BASA is they are a wealth of information on what programs work, evidence-based programs that are current, and they've researched successful models that aid in the development of specifically smaller communities like ours that are on the fringe of a big city and at risk, not quite there yet, but we are at risk of developing some more significant gun and gang violence issues. So that leads us to our implementation phase after our phase 1, which will be a year of a structured rollout of this wellness plan. So we'll coordinate that rollout plan with internal team members, setting clear timelines for each initiative to ensure that the integration into existing community frameworks is responding to the youth needs effectively. Compliance and reporting, this is a fund, it's a significant fund. We have to have, and we should have, timely submissions of progress reports to Public Safety Canada. which will guarantee accountability and transparency throughout the implementation process, and as well as ensuring that we adhere to regulations and deadlines that are within our grant funding. I mentioned this as well a little bit earlier, the development of a sustainability plan, looking at alternative funding sources and establishing regular review cycles. What works for youth now might not work in 4 years' time, and how do we review what is working and that continuous improvement for our community impact. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you for that presentation. We'll begin with Councillor Federico.
Thank you for the information. Through Mr. Durica, can you tell me, out of the $406,000 of the implementation or grant money, how much is that going to be paid to help cover probably some internal team members' wages or offset some of that? I have some concerns about this grant overall, only because I spoke to Mr. Blake Richards about this, where Airdrie was and what they were kind of looking at. We were probably not quite there yet, but then there's like an aspect of homelessness. My daughter was researching a project on this, so could you tell me right now what the homelessness for youth is right now within the town of Cochrane amongst students?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Federico, I heard a couple of things there. You're asking me where our homelessness stands with our youth right now, what the numbers are. Those are data points that we're collecting, because we all have spoken about it. We all know that there's what we call invisible homelessness, couch surfing, etc. We don't have the data internally, so this consultant will be able to help us get that data to see if we do have a problem or not. And that is why we're so excited about this fund, that if we don't have a big problem, we can get way more preventative about it. What is working? What are we doing that's working now that can prevent a future problem?
I appreciate that, and I get it. It's a grant, so you have to hire somebody to come in, but at the end of the day, I think that there's a lot of information that's out there that it doesn't take us to hire a consultant to figure this out. She provided a lot of great stats just on her own from talking to administrators at each school, to figure out the problems that are already existing. I just think that us even applying for this grant going back to November 1st of 2024, I didn't even know we applied for it, let alone that we're coming up to a year of it being put in place. I understand there are granting opportunities all over the place. However, I just don't want to turn this into a position that needs to be funded by the town of Cochrane that turns into another job for somebody, right? Like, if we're going to do a consultant position, that's where I wanted to see it to end, not have it turn into a job that essentially is going to be funded by the taxpayer. I mean, it is important information for us to have. I just think there's multiple other ways for us to figure this out, including talking to FCSS and other key stakeholders that are within our community overall. And meanwhile, now we're consulting out to a company that's in Calgary that I don't actually know what kind of understanding they have about what's happening within Cochrane. That's only my personal opinion. I realize we're not voting on this tonight, I just wanted to share my thoughts on what I feel about us even applying for this grant to begin with.
Okay. Through Deputy Mayor, if I can provide clarity, a small portion of that amount is going to the consultant. A lot of this money does flow through to the charities and the not-for-profits within our city. So we will be providing that funding once we see where the programs need some help. That is not staying internally. The consultant helps us develop the plan to find out what programs are working and how we can funnel the money towards them.
I guess lastly, out of that $406,000, if I can get that breakdown, that would be fabulous. Eventually, obviously, I realize you don't have that now, but if that could come forward to council, if we're going to spend $406,000, I'd like to see what that breakdown actually is that's gone to consultants versus flowing back into our community.
Okay. Councillor Flowers.
I'm really glad to hear about the prevention component of all this. I didn't see anything about domestic violence, so is that one of the topics that will be explored?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor Flowers, what I'm finding in this work as I speak with BASA is not to be closed about anything. So domestic violence, you immediately think of adults versus youth focus that we are. But these kinds of societal issues touch everything that make youth at risk. So everything will be on the table as to where is the best use of our time, resources within our community to help prevent gun and gang violence. So if domestic violence comes up through this, then BASA will provide us with some insights into that, yes.
Dating violence is a real issue, and I attended a couple of meetings last week with the Big Hill Haven Society, and they're really moving towards prevention, because for years we've had a lot of programs for victims of crime and victims of different things, but we've got to get at the prevention and try to make it not happen in the first place. So I'm really glad to hear that that's a focus. The RCMP were there at the meetings as well, and they're really invested in prevention. So I think it's money well spent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other lights on. Oh, Councillor McFadden, you're on now?
I'm always on.
You're always on, okay. Thank you.
But, yeah, it really, is the intent that we're gonna be getting an update on this program as it moves through the phases? Was that kind of the intent? Because Councillor Fedeco's questions kind of inspired kind of a deeper interest, because I see like in phase one, it's all about, you know, providing that detailed budget that Councillor Fedeco was asking about. But phase two is really kind of speaking to the implementation. And as I'm reading that, that's meant to be around, you know, investing with our partner organizations and helping them financially deliver on related programs or their operational funding. Is that the idea?
Through Deputy Mayor to Councillor McFadden, yes, that is exactly the idea. And I really doubt this will happen, but if BASA came back to us and said, you're doing everything perfectly and you don't need to funnel any money anyway, we would report that back to the funders and return the money. That is not going to happen. I can almost guarantee that, but that will be funneled back into our community, yes.
Okay. And so when can council kind of expect an update on this program?
So I'm doing the initial update. We will be bringing BASA to speak with you directly as well. And that will be once they have a draft plan and they want to run it by council and they will be presenting it to council. That will be your next touch point, which will be within the next 2 months.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great. Not seeing any other questions of council. Thank you, Lisa, for this. That was a great update. We're going to move on then to item 5E. The Commercial Sector Compost Waste Program. And I want to invite Shane Hubble, Director of Operational Services, to the podium.
Good evening, Council. Tonight I'm here in response to the July 8th notice of motion from Councillor Flowers, which resolved as follows. That Council direct administration to evaluate the 2024 compost waste pilot program and return with recommendations for a possible program for consideration by January 31st, 2025. When I say organics, I'm speaking about the items which go in our green bin, obviously. And while Cochrane has a very successful residential organics diversion program through our green bins, organics diversion by our ICI, or industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors, is currently voluntary. In Cochrane's ICI sector, the majority of organic waste is generated by our commercial food-related businesses, such as our restaurants and grocery stores. For our commercial food sector, there are currently no bylaws which mandate organics diversion separately from regular garbage, but there's also nothing preventing any of these businesses from implementing their own organics diversion programs either, and several voluntarily do. Very few communities in Alberta have bylaws mandating commercial sector organics programs, and even for those that do, there is no single or right approach. In your council report, I provided details on how Canmore, Calgary, and the state of California approach organics diversion, and I'm sure you noted the variety between them. In October 2022, an online survey engagement was conducted which focused on understanding current experiences by the commercial sector with the existing waste management system and gathering ideas for future improvements. Based on the feedback from the online survey, in-person engagements were then held which further explored the common themes and opportunities. In 2024, the Waste and Recycling Department began exploring what a commercial organics diversion program would look like in Cochrane, which included 2 further rounds of engagement specifically focused on food establishments, as these present the greatest opportunity for further organics diversion in our community. The chart above demonstrates the results of food establishment respondents ranking the initiatives they felt would have the largest impacts on organics diversion. The highest ranked initiative was assistance from administration in the form of signage and resources to assist with implementation. This was followed by the idea of running an organics diversion pilot to highlight the potential challenges and solutions. Food waste reduction and donation received a similar ranking as making organics diversion mandatory. And at the lower end of the ranked initiatives, developing a green business town certification and conducting monitoring and reporting received the least support of any of the proposed initiatives. Based on feedback received during the engagement sessions, the Waste and Recycling Department conducted a 7-week pilot study with local food establishments to assess the benefits and challenges to an organics diversion program. Approximately 10% of all food businesses in Cochrane were approached to be part of the pilot program. The results for the pilot demonstrated a remarkable 83% average waste diversion from landfills for those participating businesses. The following points were observed during the program. Organics diversion was easy for staff to adapt once training was provided. Businesses were very satisfied and proud of the organics diverted from landfills once the results were shared with them. When reaching out to waste haulers, businesses felt inflexibility with the cost reduction options and available container sizes, as some haulers don't utilize smaller carts, only offering larger bin options. Several businesses noted that they were locked into multi-year garbage removal contracts and would be penalized if they broke their contracts to allow for organics collections. To avoid this, if mandatory organics collection is implemented, several businesses requested a multi-year phased implementation to allow them to renegotiate organics collection at the expiry of their current waste collection contracts. Current concerns over cost increases were very present, as adding organics collection for businesses that are currently locked into a waste collection only contract would result in an increased cost until they could renegotiate their new rates. And not all property managers were in support of allocating additional space for organics bins. Organics diversion programs can take many forms. The following 3 potential options incorporate lessons learned from municipal peers, feedback from targeted engagements with Cochrane businesses, and observations from our own organic waste pilot program. Option 1 is our low-touch option. It's a voluntary participation and minimal guidance option. In this option, the town would encourage businesses to implement voluntary organics diversion programs without bylaw amendment and to provide limited technical and educational support to businesses as requested, and without any interaction with haulers to mediate level of service or costs. We would create a small communications plan encouraging voluntary business participation, provide a list of possible organics haulers to those businesses interested in participating. This is our lowest cost option. To be successful, this option would require approximately 0.25 of an FTE. This option would provide no diversion monitoring or compliance monitoring, and the expected impact to organics waste diversion we would expect to be low. In summary, if continuing organics diversion in a voluntary manner, keeping the costs and impacts low for both the municipality and businesses, while still highlighting the importance of organics diversion, I would suggest option 1. Option 2 is our medium touch option, which is mandatory participation and moderate guidance. In this option, the town would implement a mandatory organics diversion program for food establishments through bylaw amendment, with limited support and education for businesses and without interaction with haulers to mediate the level of service or costs. We'd deliver a communications plan targeted to the business community, highlighting new requirements and timelines. We'd provide a list of possible organics haulers to businesses. To be successful, this option would require about 0.5 of an FTE to the Waste and Recycling Department. Rollout would be phased over multiple years to allow businesses to transition their waste hauling. There would be no diversion monitoring. Compliance monitoring would be complaint-based, and expected impact to organic waste diversion would be moderate. In summary, if accepting higher impacts and costs for food-related businesses by making organics diversion mandatory, but that moderate results would likely be the result of lower resources and support, I would suggest option 2. Option 3 is our high-touch option, which is mandatory participation with significant guidance. For this option, the town would implement mandatory organics diversion program for food establishments through bylaw amendment, providing ongoing support and education for businesses, and bridging negotiations between haulers and businesses to ensure a high level of service and reduce costs. We would negotiate rates with haulers to ensure the best rates for our business community. We develop a comprehensive communications plan targeted to the business community, highlighting the new requirements and timelines. Regular updates would be provided to current businesses with specific outreach to new businesses. To be successful, this option would require approximately 1 FTE to the Waste and Recycling Department and ongoing funding for communications and outreach. Diversion monitoring would include regular surveys and KPI benchmarking. Compliance monitoring would be accomplished through regular diversion surveys. Rollout would once again be phased over multiple years to allow businesses to transition their waste hauling contracts. And the expected impact to organic waste diversion would be high. In summary, if successfully achieving the highest possible diversion rates at the cost of increased administrative resources and higher impacts for food-related businesses in the form of mandatory organics diversion, I would suggest option 3. In summary, there are multiple options available if council wishes to implement commercial organics diversion in Cochrane, from an enhanced voluntary model all the way through to a legislated and significantly guided model. It all comes down to what council's vision is, and based on any feedback or goals that council wishes to share, administration can build a program, including the required resources, to achieve that vision. Additionally, I'd like to thank the Fence and Post, METAB, and Sunny Side Up for participating in our engagement groups and pilot program, as well as Mr. Bertolo, who pulled all the data together for us. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to field any questions or comments.
Councillor Flowers.
Thank you for the information. That was a lot. I'm curious about the other communities. I thought Okotoks had a program.
There are several communities in Alberta. The 4 that I'm aware of, Calgary, Edmonton, Canmore, and perhaps Okotoks.
I was surprised to see California in the mix when we have one in Okotoks, but it was the mayor of Okotoks that came to the station one day and saw us throwing compostables in the garbage, and she was horrified that we weren't saving them or having a program in Cochrane, so that's where the idea came from. I'm glad to see that so many people participated. I'd like to see the high touch one myself. If we're going to do it, it's nice to have the biggest impact possible. I know when we changed to the residential composting, nobody was happy about that either. They didn't want to do it, but now it's commonplace and it's just part of what we do. So for me, I think having a big impact would be awesome.
Councillor McFadden.
Yes, thank you. So my question is kind of more on the financial side. So if we moved into this program, it's not in any way saving the municipality money, right? Because right now, all of these businesses, these are costs that they're incurring themselves. That's correct?
Through the chair to Councillor McFadden, yes, all businesses are responsible for processing their waste, any of their waste.
Right, and so, and I really appreciate this in identifying the different, levels of results, but you've also identified the costs in FTEs to support these programs. And I think I'm with Councillor Flowers, if we're going to do it, we should probably do it right. But what is so it's like a 0.25, 0.5, and a full-time employee position, and so the idea is would these be addition to our current staffing component, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so what would you be budgeting for, how much would you budget for one FTE for this role? Is that like 100,000?
Very roughly,
$75,000?
$100,000, benefits included for a coordinator. That's very, very roughly, Councillor.
Okay, yeah, no, and I was just looking for the rough numbers of that, yeah, understanding that it's not just the salary, it's, yeah, benefits, the full piece of the program, okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the update, I appreciate it. I think I probably have to do a little bit more thinking on it before I could provide my clear thoughts on it at this point.
Thank you. Mayor Janan.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciated the presentation, the details and the pilot program and the feedback shared from the participating businesses. And I want to start by saying, in my own business, I have opted in and voluntarily collected organics, and so I'm already doing this. So my statement that I'm going to make now is not about any sort of conflict of interest with my own business interests, but I really think we need to take a light touch approach on this one. Not because of the environmental impacts. I agree that we need to be diverting as much organics from the landfill as possible, so I agree with that sentiment. It's delving into areas of where we have reach and where we don't. Business sector right now, we're not policing or enforcing garbage other than if it's blowing off or if it's unsightly. Businesses are really left to their own demise to, as you say, Mr. Hubble, pay for the removal of waste. So when we start to get into that, if we're going to go all in, there's going to be an all-in approach of, well, how are we enforcing it? How are we safeguarding that or making sure that these practices are being followed? And I just feel like we're really getting into something that maybe we should stay out of at this point. But I do agree that maybe, and I guess one of the things that got me thinking about it was having to have these contracts personally through my business. It's there is a long term that these garbage collectors have. So you're bang on when you say some of the feedback of if the city or the town were to implement a change now, that this may have an unintended impact on businesses where they have to back out of contracts for long term. So why I like the light touch is that it's kind of a dipping our toe into it, educating businesses that maybe we can have them do this in their own way, and maybe there's a way that fits them each individually in the best way possible for them. So through education and maybe just modeling it. I mean, we're already used to doing it at home. Some of the business owners in our community don't even live in our community, so we have some barriers to break down. So that's why I kind of like the light touch of kind of easing into this. One question I have at the end of my statement there was, and Councillor Flowers brings up a good point, and you were saying that you're at the station. Well, that's a municipally owned building. Do we have all three, like blue, black, and green, available at all of our municipally owned or controlled buildings currently?
Through the chair to Mayor Janung, yes, I believe we do.
Okay, so maybe that was at a time when that hadn't been there, or maybe it was in a transition to, but I've also noticed the same practice at the rec center. I'm not sure if they're following, maybe that's changed, and I shouldn't even have said that, I'm gonna get in trouble tomorrow, but I don't know if maybe there's some more modeling and impacts that we can have through just some of the entities that we interface with that are already partners budget-wise. So maybe we start there. That's kind of just a suggestion or a question about how are we handling that currently.
Through the chair once again, I'm not aware of what we do at the rec center, but it's something that we could absolutely look at.
And it's not our own operator there, so that's just that's what I mean by a relationship. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Federico.
Through Mr. Jericho, thank you for the information. Could this person, if we were to hire another position to obviously educate businesses, could it also be used to educate homeowners? I was a part of Mr. Bortolo's, organic separating thing back in, I believe, 2018, and it was it's probably still one of the most enlightening things that I've gone through as a council member over my entire terms that I've been a part of council. He taught me a lot. I'm just wondering if that person could be utilized to also look at homeowners and trying to educate them. I think that, you know, it's one thing to go after businesses, but if we've lost the traction, and because I don't feel that I've necessarily, maybe it's just me, maybe I lost the information somewhere, that I don't feel like I have enough information as to, you know, what even homeowners are doing with organic collection. I feel like if we're gonna, you know, dedicate one person to be looking at businesses, why are these people not looking at homeowners and trying to educate them and trying to take this entire approach community-wide over Cochrane?
Through the chair to Councillor Fideko, at the risk of sounding like I'm trying to advocate for a staff member, yes, absolutely. We have grand visions for our waste and recycling department at this time. The waste and recycling department is comprised of Mr. Bortolo and a part-time admin. The waste, or our eco center has a separate group that maintains it, but all other waste and recycling in the community is Mr. Bortolo and our part-time administrators. So there are so many options or opportunities that we'd like to explore with additional staff.
I think with that, obviously I'm not giving my opinion tonight, but I would suggest that prior to you coming back to council, that you really do take a look at that position and what they be offering, not just businesses, but homeowners overall. I would like to see if we are going to, you know, increase a resource to Cochrane, let's figure out a way that we're utilizing this more than just in one way and dealing with businesses, because that's kind of what it comes across right now. But if we're taking a position and we're gonna educate people overall, because the number one message that I get all the time is that, you know, if people are dumping the same stuff into organics, it combines garbage, it just seems kind of useless. And I don't say that in an insulting way, but I think if we are going to educate people, let's educate everyone. Businesses, homeowners, let's bring on that resource, but let's do it really good, really right. And if you can come back to me with that proposal, that's something that definitely I consider overall.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you. Question about any possible benefit. I'm sitting here thinking about what possible benefit it could have to an individual food establishment. And I don't mean to ask it in an acute way, like, is this just a total, is this just an awful, you know, obligation on them? But I'm thinking more along the lines of when we did residential organics collection, the benefit to the individual obviously is by having it shared throughout the community. We've established the contract for the pickup of the green bin as something that probably an individual residents wouldn't have come to themselves. Is it that way with our restaurant community here in Cochrane? Can you think of any reason why they would actually appreciate this program?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, for the greater good, because it's the right thing to do. Diverting our waste into individual streams prevents contamination. Some of the pieces that I touched on in my council report on the why of it, our landfills are filling up quickly, methane gas, so being a good steward, citizen, person.
If I may add to that, I definitely agree that I think the main driver of this would be social responsibility, but there can be you know, practical benefits, including cost savings. I think those to be realized. For example, organics are the heaviest thing that we put into our garbage, and you generally get charged by weight. Ultimately, that's the cost of trucking and all the things that come along with that. And so if you can reduce the weight of things being trucked to the landfill where it's true waste, whereas organic haulers are generating an outcome from that can be resold, reused, and so there's opportunities there to potentially reduce the overall cost of your waste management. However, it requires, as you said, the implementation of a broad system to achieve the economies of scale that would make that viable, as in an individual business owner isn't likely to be able to achieve the economies of scale where they could find their waste being hauled very much cheaper by separating it. But if collectively they were all separating it and those organics were going off to separate facilities where they were being repurposed ultimately, there's possible economic benefits to those. I don't want to overstate that because I'm not the one with the expertise in those, but I do think that those margins are relatively limited, but I just wanted to point out that there is that possibility. I think that would require the high touch scenario here where the broader system is being activated to achieve anything close to approximating that. And if I may take this opportunity, Mr. Chair, just to reinforce a point that Mayor Jinung was making that I think is an important one is there is a threshold we would be crossing by stepping into the commercial waste space. And I think that's the primary question that council should answer first. If you take the seal off of getting involved in managing commercial waste, that is a significant shift in dynamic. Again, I don't want to suggest that I'm placing any value on whether they council should or shouldn't, just that they should. You should all be aware that then you're wading into this space, and if not, organics, then why not other elements of commercial waste? And then it opens up a whole host of other opportunities. I don't want to pretend all of that would be bad, but there could be, as we know what comes along with that, a whole host of expectations that may be difficult to manage if you delve into that world of commercial waste management. Again, I just raised that point mostly for awareness.
Thanks. Excellent points there from the CAO. Generally, my thinking lines up along with the mayor's arguments, which is this part of our scope? Is this something we should be getting into? The only way I would be interested in any of the options would be the light touch one, and that's if I recognized an opportunity to do for commercial what we've done for our residential situation, which is essentially supply everybody with green bins, supply them with pickup that's easy. You don't have to negotiate your own contract. It's just simply here you're into the system, and that could actually be a benefit for the businesses. Outside of that, I have zero appetite for this idea. Certainly the stronger touch ones mentioned, and I guess that would even extend to residential for me, where if we're getting into the policing of what goes in what bin and surveying and analyzing garbage collection, I lose all interest in any program of that variety. So I guess that would be my opinions on it.
No,
in a nutshell, if it were to come back, I guess I would just say that I'd love to hear about what economies of scale, or at least ease for a business, could be created by providing them with bins and having a contract in place like we do for residential. So that does interest me.
Yeah, I would just conclude by saying, well, first of all, thank you for this presentation. It was really informative. From my perspective, a couple of things, with all due respect to Councillor Flowers, I'd be completely opposed to anything that was mandatory of this nature. I think that strong-handedness is just inappropriate and way outside our lane of responsibilities from my humble perspective. And so if anything, I would go with a light touch. I think in many ways, the benefit for businesses is to be able to show that they are socially responsible. And I think we're seeing that in some larger organizations like oil companies, oil and gas companies that are looking to become more socially responsible. I think it would be advantageous for local businesses to, and even customers to encourage that, right, in terms of the businesses they frequent. But yeah, if anything, I think this is kind of, I'm like with Councillor Wilson, I think this is kind of out of the lane of council, although I think we have a social responsibility. I just don't know how far it goes. So the light touch would be the only one I personally would consider. So I don't see any other comments from council, but again, thank you for this information, and I hope some of the feedback was helpful for you.
It was, absolutely. Thank you, Council.
Okay. We'll move on then to 5F. This is the Cochrane Municipal Policing Committee bylaw, and just, Jay, just to kind of put this in a context, I know that some of this is mandatory and will be difficult to navigate as a committee, but I think it's important, and I don't know that we have really much choice in terms of moving forward from what I understand of the legislation, but I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and councillors. I'm here tonight to speak to the proposed Cochrane Municipal Policing Committee bylaw. In December 2022, the province passed Bill 6, the Police Amendment Act, which will take effect on March 1st, 2025. This legislation is focused on policing and aims to enhance transparency and accountability, civilian involvement in policing, diversity and inclusion within police services, collaboration between police and community partners to improve public safety, and they're specifically aimed at municipalities that are policed by the RCMP. Under this new legislation, we are required to establish a municipal policing committee. And just allow me, if you would, to explain what a municipal policing committee is and how it serves our community. Firstly, it's comprised of civilians that live in Cochrane. It acts as a civilian oversight body, ensuring that the RCMP's services are aligned with the needs and expectations of our community. It provides a forum for Cochrane residents and officials to communicate with our RCMP detachment responsible for our community. It ensures that local policing priorities reflect our community's needs, such as crime prevention, resource allocation, and public safety concerns. It oversees the implementation of policing plans and provides input on police budget matters. It enhances transparency, accountability, and responsiveness of the RCMP to local policing concerns. The Municipal Policing Committee is required to report on their activities, policing priorities, and performance metrics to Cochrane Municipal Council and the public. A member of this committee will be designated as a public complaint director to assist the officer in charge in resolving complaints. They will receive complaints from the public, act as a liaison, review the complaint investigation, offer alternative dispute resolution processes, and provide reports and statistics on all complaints received. Now, as you know, establishing a municipal policing committee requires us to first create a foundational bylaw. The draft version of the proposed bylaw is presented to you in your package for consideration tonight, and administration is seeking your input before bringing it forward for first reading at the next regular council meeting. That concludes this presentation. Thank you for your time. I welcome any questions or comments that you may have.
Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, you know what, I think this is a great move. I think there's a lot of interest in our community in being able to kind of engage more closely with the RCMP. So I really like this. And a couple of questions. One of the elements I really did like was that the membership, and it's explicitly calling out for youth participation, outlining that as somebody from between 16 and 18 attending school in the town of Cochrane. And then you've got a member of town council. So are you required to have a youth member? Or is it, so what I'm trying to understand is, it's one member of town council, which is great. And then is it 6 residents of the town of Cochrane? Or is it 5 plus a youth member?
Through the chair to Councillor McFadden, it would be 6 residents of Cochrane. One of them may be a youth between the age of 16 and 18.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. And then there was this piece here, L6 something, that in recommending membership to this committee, be recommended to council by the CAO as a suitable candidate in consideration of the above reference requirements and reference checks, etc. Is that requirement that it come through the CAO, is that kind of standard to how this bylaw is written across the province, or did we create that one?
That is standard verbiage through a template that was provided through the Alberta Association of Police Governance.
Okay.
That most municipalities have used over the past few months to develop their bylaw.
Type thing. And so are we thinking that we would, pretty much utilize our current system as where we would go and folks would apply, they would be interviewed, they'd meet these extra requirements, police checks, and then that would come to council, but through the CAO recommending it as opposed to the chair or someone else, and then council makes the decision from there? That's essentially the same process with some minor adjustments?
Through the chair to Councillor McFadden, that's exactly the process that it would take, yes.
Yeah, if I may just add to that through the chair, Councillor McFadden, I think the reference to the CAO there is as the head of the administrative function that's taking place behind there. But as you described, I think our intention would be to follow the process as we have for our other public committees where we request applicants to come in under the criteria, they're reviewed, and ultimately council appoints the residents that they think will most appropriately support the function of the committee.
Excellent. Anyway, yeah, I think this is a great step forward, and we can only hope that we get as much enthusiasm for joining this committee of council as we did for our recreation, or our, help me out,
Environmental Task Force.
the environmental task force. So the goal is 55 applicants to this. Excellent. Anyhow, but no, excited to see it, and we'll look forward to talking about this further at the next council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we're good. Councillor Federico.
Thank you. Through Mr. Jarcott, actually kind of piggybacking on Councillor McFadden's point. So the one thing that I had read is that the CEO is not to have any sort of influence over this committee at all. And so that's one thing I read through the provincial guidelines that I had investigated. So I guess I'd just be curious as to whether or not we're following, like you said, the kind of average that's happening throughout the province. If we can get that maybe emailed to us, I'd like to see that, just because of the fact that it was stated that the CAO should really be offhands on this committee. And I do believe that there is, you know, perhaps some value on removing government out of this, considering that this is supposed to be a civilian-based committee, right? And so if we're gonna be a civilian-based committee, do I feel that myself as a councillor member or as the head of administration should really be vetting people? Perhaps not. I mean, Mr. Juden, I believe that you have a lot of experience in dealing with police and everything else. Perhaps you're the person to vet. That comes back to council. Council then decides, and then I'll leave administration, head administration out of it. Just, I become a little worried as to where that's going to go, considering that is what is suggested by the provincial guidelines. So I don't know if you have anything to add. I definitely heard kind of what was stated, but if there is some sort of policy that you could provide that every other community is doing it the same way, then that would be helpful to me. But right now, I'd like to take that away from the hands out of a minute, like top administration, bring it down to grassroots as to what this committee is really supposed to be about.
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Federico, I can definitely take that away, and that's exactly the purpose of tonight, so I will take that away.
If I may, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Federico, I'm not sure that you did hear what I said, is that reference to the CAO is only as the head of the administrative function, and just like the environmental task force, the staff members with the expertise and background are the ones who supported the committee chair in the process, and that's the way it would be in this one as well. So I just wanted to be, again, very, very clear that we would be following those normal processes. And I think you rightly identified in this case, currently someone like Mr. Juden or whoever was the appropriate staff member would be overseeing and supporting that function.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Councillor Wilson.
Oh, thanks. A question to Mr. Juden about, I guess, what legislation did we just read about? Bill 6 that requires this, that requires us to set up this police commission in Cochrane, is that correct? All we're talking about is size and scope, and that's what's left to council to decide? Is this mandated that we set up this police inquiry commission?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, yes, that's correct. We are mandated as a municipality over 15,000 people to implement a municipal policing committee.
Okay, thank you.
Under that amendment.
So as I'm looking through it, I see quite a few reasons why I think this could be a good thing. I see a lot of possible benefits. I'm looking at just trying to think out some of the downsides, and obviously one of them would be financial implications, which it says 10 to 25,000 for setup, and an ongoing cost of 25 to 75,000 just for annual operational needs. Any thoughts on any other downsides to a police commission? Does this add a bureaucratic layer? Does this slow any functions down? I'm just trying to think of, you know, what are the negatives that we could possibly be dealing with? Certainly,
through the chair to Councillor Wilson, excuse me. Financial implications are definitely a drawback on this. The municipality is responsible for setting up the committee as well as any administrative costs, ongoing administrative costs, and sustaining that committee. The numbers you see there were really a ballpark figure when it was written a while ago, since some benchmarking has taken place. The largest portion of the setup costs refers to the RCMP enhanced clearance check, which can run between $1,600 and $2,000 per member. In conversations with the province, I do understand that the provincial government is looking at an alternative security check, or potentially even covering the costs around that. I'm not sure what the option is they're going to be presenting, but I've been informed that there is some discussion on that. We also have the opportunity to use some of our police support grant that we received through the province to offset some of those costs. Those are currently all, if I'm correct, diverted to our overall policing costs right now. So it'd kind of be robbing Peter to pay Paul in that case, but that's definitely a downside. In some more recent research and talking with some other municipalities around that already have a municipal policing committee in place, their costs for sustaining that committee range between $5,000 and $15,000 per year. So much lower than what's quoted in the report that you received tonight.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, that's much lower than what we have here as an ongoing cost. That's heartening. Just final question about the actual operation, and so it would be a committee like other council committees, and when there's a resolution from the committee or something that they want to move ahead, how does that go ahead? Does that come back to council, or I don't quite or does it go right to, it's just the committee speaking with the police executive, or how does?
Through the chair, Councilor Wilson, that's correct. It would run identical, very similar to the other committees that we currently have in place.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm asking questions out of general. I don't actually have a real opinion on how this might play out, but I suppose we'll see this at a council meeting near us for first reading, it sounds like. Thanks for the information.
Before we start the second round, I wanted to ask some questions of my own, and then I'll pick up on where Councilor Wilson left off. And so what authorization, or what would be the net results of this, and where would they go? So as I understand it, basically it's an oversight committee that would do complaint oversight. So where do those results go?
Deputy Mayor, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, it's about the complaint process?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure what authority would this group have, and what results would come of it? So somebody complains about an officer or something like that. This group would investigate, or do you have to have a full-time person do the complaint investigation, and then the committee considers that, or I'm just trying to visualize how this runs out, and then who do their result go to?
Right, so Deputy Mayor, as a complaint comes in, the public complaints director will work with the officer in charge of the RCMP to help resolve the complaint in consultation with the complainant themselves. And that might be through an alternative resolution process, mediation, whatever method is decided upon to resolve that. Ultimately, more serious matters, more serious complaints against the RCMP are investigated at a higher level through the RCMP, and in the case of a serious injury, serious bodily injury or death, the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team is responsible for investigating those types of complaints against officers or investigations into officers.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, because that's what I tried to understand from the
I
document.
think
And the other question I had.
I think I can add to
Sorry.
that, Deputy Mayor. I think the biggest element of that is that it's more about oversight than authority. It's just that the public then is involved and connected to those processes.
Right.
And so there can be an increased confidence from the public that when a matter is raised with the RCMP, that the process is followed and that the complaints are taken seriously. And then that can all be reported back to this committee that represents the public. So it's more about the oversight and I think building confidence in those processes and how complaints are managed, not a direct authority to mandate actions or outcomes as part of it. That's not the intent of that part of the
Thank you.
process.
I appreciate that clarity. The other question I had was the remuneration for the committee members. So none of our other committees pay the public members, and I'm wondering why would this one do it? And if that then opens a door that other public members would feel that they should be compensated in a financial way for their membership on a town committee.
My understanding was that there was a remuneration for,
There are, if I may, again, Deputy Mayor, if you think about like our subdivision and development appeal board, there are some of our committees that do receive remuneration, and that is at the discretion of council. We don't have to do that in this committee. That would be one thing that we would want to evaluate as to whether or not that would support better outcomes for the committee, and council could determine that it's unnecessary and decide not to do that, or that it may support the outcomes of the committee and decide to go in that direction. But those are the areas where council, I think, we want and need your feedback in terms of the structure and the implementation through the bylaw. So I think that's a valid question, and one that we will be asking council to determine whether or not they would want to see this be a committee that is compensated for their contribution.
Yeah, personally, I think compensating somebody for training and workshops is appropriate, but not for committee participation. That's why you're a volunteer. So anyways, that's just my thoughts, but I'll turn to Councillor McFadden.
Yeah, thank you very much. My questions was around like the costs, and so I think we've gotten clarity on the cost. Those were kind of ballparks, because any of the other committees we've struck, we've never talked about what the cost might be. We've just kind of administratively, taken on those costs, whether staff supporting the various committees, however that might be. So my questions were going to be around that, but what I'm hearing from you is that the true costs are probably going to be around the police checks and those type of requirements. Those are probably the real costs. So then I was just looking at the different duties and responsibilities as were outlined in the bylaw, and so one of the pieces it says here is to oversee the agreement between the town of Cochrane and the Government of Canada for the services of the RCMP. And another piece is that the committee is to represent the interest of the council to the officer in charge. So I'm just trying to, I want more oversight with a better relationship and more eyes on the RCMP. But are we thinking this is going to kind of, would this get in the way of the relationship that council may have with the RCMP? Because currently we do get an annual report from the RCMP, and I understand that through your office, we do provide some direction about what our priorities and strategies are. So is it kind of taking over some of the municipal, or is it in addition to municipal direction?
through the council, or through the chair to Councillor McFadden, it would be essentially taking the place. The councillor on the committee would be the council's representation itself, but that wouldn't necessarily stop you or any other councillor, or the mayor, or deputy mayor from having a conversation about your concerns. The direction and yearly plans of priorities that you as council and the citizens set for the police would be their guiding, would provide the guidance for their policing in Cochrane.
Right, yeah, so and that's what I like, is a way for our community to kind of, to give direction about what our priorities in our policing are, so that's really appealing to me. There's also like to submit a yearly budget to council for ratification. So is that yearly budget to council for ratification, is that a budget in support of the committee, or is that the annual policing budget?
Through the chair to Councillor McFadden, that is only for the policing committee. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's interesting. And then the other one on this was that this committee will appoint a public complaint director. So what is a public complaint director, and does that cost us money?
Through the chair to Councillor McFadden, so that public complaints director is a member of the committee,
Okay.
Assigned out of the committee as one of the members, to take on those roles that were mentioned earlier.
Okay. And then I think maybe just my final point, and it doesn't really do anything to our discussion tonight, but anytime the province is mandating that we take on an activity or a program and mandating us to take on something that has a cost, it gets my back up, because they'll mandate us to introduce a product, they'll mandate us to take on a cost, and then they'll turn around and gripe at us for not keeping taxes low enough. So if there's a way that we can advocate, to get support in these costs, I think we really need to find a way to do that. I think it's great, but the fact that anytime that we're mandated to do something by another level of government, we should really get the support to cover off those costs. So that's my final thought on this, but overall, I really do think this is going to improve the service level of the RCMP to the town of Cochrane.
Okay. Councillor Federico?
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to point out the one point that was in the report, that it did say that the CAO would be the person who would be recommending people towards council. So whether or not that needs to be altered in any sort of way. And I do agree with Councillor Reid, or Deputy Mayor Reid, about the fact that I don't feel that we need to pay people to sit on this committee. I think that we will probably have enough public interest overall that I don't think enticing people with a paycheck is something that I'd probably want to do. I think that we can find lots of qualified candidates to be able to sit. But I just wanted to bring that up, that while it might be on other boards, it just was a point that was listed under the qualifications as who would be recommending members. It does say the CEO is recommending members. If that is not the case, because that was a thing that was highlighted in the provincial guidelines, I just wanted to bring that up. So maybe it needs to be removed.
I think that's a good point to take away, Jay, as well. Mayor Janang.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the presentation tonight, and I think this is going to be a positive addition to our community. Obviously, we have to do it, so doing it in a way that contributes to our relationship with the RCMP, I think, is going to be key. I think, and many have said it already, but as it does add a layer and some cost to us, but I think there's also an upside, and that is involving residents in the conversation about what kind of service we're receiving from the RCMP. Yeah. We get these emails all the time. You guys should be doing this, or there should be more RCMP here, or we should be looking at this issue. But having people that are in the community, not an elected official, in those conversations with deployment of services and where best to prioritize those. Because every time I have a one-to-one conversation with somebody who's complaining about that, when I start to argue or give the full picture of, well, do you want us to take away, and not that we have the direct ability to do that, but do we want to have a conversation with the RCMP to actually go from here and go to there? They often go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So having more people having that conversation, I think, is a good thing. I think we're going to have to be very clear on the mandate. It's clear and becoming more clear to us, but we're not always understanding exactly what it is we're asking of these people. And I think we could really go off the rails quickly if we go out and ask people to sit on this committee and they think it's one thing and then actually we want them to do something else. So I think we need to be super clear on that. And it's pretty clear in the report, but I just mean when we go out and ask. And then around the per diem and the remuneration, I guess, was that put in because there was an expectation that there's going to be a cost associated with putting your hand up for this? And I did hear you say about some training. So is there this back check, and I know that you're getting some more information on that, but is that the reason why maybe the per diem was suggested in the first place by administration? Because if you volunteered for this, that you were out of pocket something?
Through the chair to the mayor, through benchmarking with other municipalities that currently have this, some do pay remuneration, some do not. My understanding when I drafted that information package for you is that the other committees did have a remuneration component to them, and that's why it was included in with your package tonight.
Yeah, because I think the only other committee that we do that for, there is an expectation for those members to take training, and there's a cost to that time commitment outside of just volunteering for your community. So I think if there's no cost to be on the committee to a person putting their hand up, then we should take away the per diem. But if there is a cost for training, I think we should compensate people fairly for that, whether it be cover the training or through a per diem. I'm open to either one. But I generally like what I see in front of us tonight. It's a really good step. I think we're a step we have to take, but one I think that we're going to be better off for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flowers.
I too think that the committee's a great idea and there's gonna be good outcomes for the community. There's such a chance to form partnerships and get a lot of people involved in different ways, but I do think it's dangerous to start paying volunteers. We could pay the Environmental Task Force, we could pay FCSS and Victim Services, all the ones that get into it for the greater good and want to make a difference in the community. So I do agree that if they're out of pocket, they should get reimbursed, but not just for going to meetings. I think there'll be lots of people keen to get involved and make a difference in this area. And I think that was it.
Okay. Councillor McFadden, have the final word on this?
Only it was always like that. Just on the remuneration conversation, and I generally do lean on that our committees are a way for our community members to volunteer and to be a part of our civic solutions. But then there's always, exceptions. And I just wanted to put this thought in there because we have this position of appoint a public complaint director. And that seems to be a more serious role than to be one of a group of 7 that are showing up and participating in good faith on my Parks and Rec committee, for example. So I think we might, just see how it goes, but that, like, to have a dedicated public complaint director, somebody's name is going to be, taking those phone calls, it's a different type of committee. And I think just maybe we should have that context in it when we're kind of looking
Fair enough.
at this. So that was just a new one on me, and I just wanted to put that bug in everybody's ear.
Fair enough.
Anyway, those are my final thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do think, if I may just again add to this, is going to be a little bit of a learning process as well. So there may be some need to revisit some of this as we go and learn and see how it functions in our committee. One of the other, whether it's remuneration for someone like a complaint director because there's some additional expectation, or there's other things like how the information flows between council, the committee, and the RCMP. And so there may be some things that we want to adjust and change down the road. As I think council has noted tonight, I think this is a great start, but as with any new processes, I could expect, a year from now, we may be back saying, hey, we maybe want to adjust this or tweak this as we get familiar with the process and how it can help our community and drive some of those better outcomes.
Fair enough. Councillor Flowers wants to have the final word.
One more thing. The costs seem awfully high for the criminal record check. Must be a pretty in-depth check that they do, is it?
Through the chair to Councillor Flowers, that's correct. It's an enhanced security check through the RCMP.
So I thought that was just part of the duties of the RCMP. I didn't realize that they would charge that back to us. We should charge also for our staffing component too then. It just seems awfully high.
On that note, thanks, Jay, for that presentation. A great start, and I think I think you got some great feedback from council on this, so thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you very much.
Council, we're going to move into a closed session, so I would entertain a motion to go into the closed session. Councilor Januk, thank you. All in favor? That's carried.